Have you ever wondered what happens when fate refuses to let go? He had it all: wealth, power, a view of the Bosphorus that stretched like a painting, but no one to share it with. And on one of the loneliest nights of his life, all he wanted was something simple, a pizza. But when the door opened, what he saw was not dinner. It was the woman he once loved and lost, 2 decades apart, 2 lives built in silence and sacrifice, and now, face to face again, with a world between them. But sometimes all it takes is a reminder disguised as a delivery to unlock the love you never really let go of. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and keeps stories like this coming to life. Share with someone special. The glittering skyline of Istanbul stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. From where he stood, Karim al-Rashid could see the shimmering surface of the Bosphorus reflect the golden city lights, painting the water with fragments of 1,000 fleeting dreams. It should have felt majestic. It should have felt like victory. But for him, it felt like nothing at all. He stood there silently, one hand in his tailored trouser pocket, the other loosely holding a crystal glass of untouched scotch. The expensive liquid barely trembled, mirroring his composed exterior, an illusion he had perfected over years of masking emptiness behind wealth. Karim was 35, a billionaire, a self-made tycoon, CEO of Al-Rashid Holdings, an empire of real estate stretching from Dubai to New York, from London to the tip of Asia. The media loved him. Forbes had placed him on their cover twice. Investors worshipped his genius. The world bowed to his power. Yet not a single soul in the world truly knew him. His days were packed with meetings, figures, properties, and signatures. His nights were colder than the steel and glass fortress he lived in. Lovers came and went, some staying long enough to believe they mattered, none staying long enough to prove they did. The truth was simple. Karim al-Rashid, one of the wealthiest men alive, was profoundly, silently, and hopelessly alone. He turned away from the window and walked through the vast open-plan living room. Everything around him whispered of affluence: the imported Italian marble beneath his feet, the hand-crafted Turkish chandeliers hanging above, the museum-worthy paintings adorning the walls. And yet, not a single item gave him comfort. The apartment was spotless, too spotless, like a showroom no one lived in. His phone buzzed on the glass table, a message from his assistant. "Your mother called again. She's requesting an answer about the wedding proposal." He didn't respond. It was the 3rd time this week. Leyla Hanım, his elegant, proud, and ever-determined mother, was set on seeing him married. Not to just anyone, of course, but to the daughter of a powerful Emirati family. A union of prestige, money, and lineage, a calculated move, just like every decision Karim had ever been expected to make. He sat down on the edge of the leather sofa, exhaling slowly. Love. That had never been part of the equation. There had been one person long ago, but he had buried that part of himself, or at least he thought he had. His fingers traced the edge of the remote control absently. He didn't want to watch anything. Not another business documentary, not another empty interview of himself on television. What he craved was something else, something small, something normal. He suddenly stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and picked up the landline. It had been years since he used it. Without overthinking, he dialed the first number that came to mind, a place from his university days, a local pizza joint tucked in a modest neighborhood of Istanbul. The kind of place that remembered your order if you were a regular. He didn't know if they were still open, or if they even delivered this far into the high-end district. It rang once, twice. Then someone picked up. "Pizzeria Milano, good evening," said a warm, familiar voice on the other end. Karim blinked. That voice. There was something in it, something that tugged at a part of him that had been asleep for decades. He cleared his throat. "I'd like to place an order for delivery." "What would you like, sir?" He hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. "1 large margarita, extra olives, and a Coke." "Address?" He gave it. The voice paused for a second, as if registering the opulence behind the location, but said nothing. 30 minutes, she replied. He hung up. It was such a small thing, ordering pizza. But something about it felt grounding, almost nostalgic, like a thread tying him back to the version of himself that existed before the billions, before the boardrooms, before his heart froze behind expectations. He didn't know why he had ordered it. He wasn't hungry, he wasn't craving food. What he craved was a memory, a moment of normalcy in the chaos of perfection. As he waited, he didn't check emails, didn't scroll through business alerts. He simply walked back to the window, watching the dark waves ripple under the moonlight. And in the stillness, a thought crossed his mind, so soft and fleeting, it almost vanished. Aylin. He hadn't thought of her in years, or perhaps he had, but pushed the thought so deep that it became part of his shadow. She was the only woman he had ever loved, back when he was just a young man with ambition in his eyes and rebellion in his heart. They were inseparable. Until they weren't. Her name lingered like a ghost. The doorbell rang. Karim didn't move at first. The chime echoed through the penthouse, startling him out of the trance. He placed the untouched scotch on the table and walked to the door. He opened it casually and froze. There, standing in the hallway with a thermal pizza bag and a stunned expression, was Aylin. Older, yes, but unmistakably her. The same dark eyes that once held his world, the same subtle curve of her lips, though now marked by fatigue. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup. Her delivery uniform hung slightly loose on her thin frame. Yet to Karim, it felt like time had collapsed. Her eyes widened as she recognized him. "Karim," she whispered, barely audible. He couldn't speak. 20 years of silence crashed into that moment. He had ordered a pizza, and the universe had delivered the only thing he had truly hungered for. But what would he do now that fate had thrown open a door he had long thought sealed forever? The air in the penthouse remained still long after the door had closed. Karim stood motionless, gripping the edge of the sleek marble counter, as though it were the only thing keeping him from falling into the weight of the moment. Aylin. It wasn't just a name, it was a flood, a pulse, a memory so vivid it shattered 2 decades of ice in a single breath. She had stood there holding a pizza box, her hand trembling slightly, her lips parted in disbelief. And now she was gone, swallowed by the elevator before he could even ask her to stay, or speak, or breathe properly. He stared at the untouched pizza box on the kitchen island like it was a relic, a portal to a version of himself he barely remembered, when love was innocent, raw, and painfully real. Karim slowly peeled back the lid. The smell hit him first. Warm bread, tomato, olives, just the way he used to like it. He smiled bitterly. It was more than a craving. It was the taste of memory. He took a slice and sat by the window again, this time not to look at the city, but to feel the crack spreading through his carefully guarded armor. Back in university, when his family still believed he might become a doctor or lawyer, Karim used to sneak away from the pressures of legacy and reputation to a little bookstore cafe near campus. That's where he had met her. Aylin, the architecture student with wild ideas, sketchbooks full of impossible buildings, and a laugh that could bend gravity. She worked part-time in that cafe and didn't care who he was or how much money his father made. She looked at him like a person, not a position, and that had terrified his family. Their romance had blossomed in secret corners, park benches, borrowed textbooks, and whispered dreams. Until one day, it ended. Abruptly, brutally, not because the love died, but because the world around them had no space for it. Karim had done nothing to stop it, and now she was back. His mind raced. What had happened to her? Why was she delivering pizzas? Was she still in Istanbul? Married? Happy? He hated not knowing. More than that, he hated the sudden ache in his chest that reminded him he had never really let her go. He barely slept that night. The next morning, Karim instructed his assistant to hold his meetings. He paced the penthouse like a man possessed. There was a storm in his blood, a sense that if he didn't find her again, he might regret it forever. He called the pizzeria, his voice calm, rehearsed. "Good morning. I ordered a pizza last night to Bosphorus Heights. I'd like to know the name of the delivery person. I'm sorry, sir, that information is confidential. I'll pay you 1,000 lira just for the name. There was a pause on the other end. Hold, please. A minute later, a quieter voice returned. Her name is Aylin Kaya, but she doesn't usually work delivery. It was just a last-minute fill-in. Karim closed his eyes. Kaya. Of course. He hadn't remembered her last name until now, but hearing it again was like turning a page in an old diary and finding yourself staring into the eyes of the past. He thanked them and hung up. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus. Not on stocks, not on numbers, not on boardroom strategies. His mind was tethered to one word, one woman, one impossibility: Aylin. That evening, as the sky shifted from gold to deep sapphire, he left the office without telling anyone and drove himself, something he rarely did, into one of the older neighborhoods of Istanbul. He parked near the pizzeria, a small, unassuming place tucked between a pharmacy and a bookstore. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. 2 young men worked behind the counter, laughing at something on a phone. They looked up, startled by the sudden presence of a man who clearly didn't belong to this side of the city, dressed in a suit worth more than their combined salaries for the month. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Aylin Kaya." They glanced at each other. "She's not working today. Do you know when she'll be back?" The shorter one scratched his head. "She only comes in sometimes. She's got another job, I think. And a kid." Karim's heart squeezed. A child. He gave them his number. "If she comes in, tell her Karim al-Rashid is looking for her. Tell her I owe her a conversation." They nodded, clearly more confused than curious. He left, but the ache remained. That night he found himself scrolling through social media, searching for her name. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no Instagram. Just silence. It felt fitting somehow. She had disappeared the way she always lived. Quietly, with dignity. Days passed. He went through the motions, meetings, calls, charity galas. Everything he was expected to be, but every night he returned to that moment at the door. Her face, her silence, her eyes widening as they locked onto his. It wasn't just surprise he had seen there. It was pain, a pain that hadn't faded in 20 years. Then, one Thursday afternoon, as he was exiting a hotel lobby after a business luncheon, Karim caught a glimpse of someone across the street. A woman with a pizza bag in one hand and a boy walking beside her. His breath caught. It was her. She hadn't seen him. She was helping the boy, probably her son, adjust the strap of his backpack. Her touch was gentle, protective. Her face, though older, still held that same resolute strength beneath the tired lines. He wanted to cross the street, to call her name, to tell her everything, but he didn't. Instead, he stood still like a man watching a memory walk away for the second time. Only this time, he wouldn't let it end here. He had let her slip away once. He wouldn't do it again. The rain had started gently that evening, a quiet drizzle softening the streets of Istanbul, blurring headlights and reflecting golden puddles under the city's glow. Karim stood in his penthouse once again, eyes tracing the pattern of the droplets sliding down the windows, like memories he could neither stop nor control. He hadn't been able to find her again, not at the pizzeria, not in the streets, not online. She had vanished just as suddenly as she had appeared. Still, the image of her, standing at his door holding that pizza box with trembling hands, haunted him like a secret melody only he could hear. There was so much he hadn't said, so much he hadn't asked, and worst of all, so much he hadn't apologized for. That night his hunger was real, not for food but for closure, or maybe redemption. Still, he did the only thing he could think of. He called the same pizzeria. "I'd like to place another order," he said, his voice calm but his heartbeat quickening. Same as before. There was a pause. "Address?" He gave it again. He didn't dare ask for her by name, but he hoped. 35 minutes passed. He waited by the door like a man awaiting judgment. Every sound in the hallway made his chest tighten. Every silence made him question his sanity. Then, at last, the chime of the doorbell. He walked slowly to the door and opened it. His breath caught. It was her. Aylin, again. This time she didn't wear the same stunned expression as before. Her eyes were guarded now, sharper, like someone bracing for pain. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said flatly, holding the bag forward. Karim swallowed hard. "I was hoping I might." Her eyes flickered. "So you ordered a pizza just to see me again?" "Yes." A pause. "That's a lot of effort for someone who disappeared for 20 years. Karim winced, but nodded. "You're right." She didn't step inside, didn't even shift her weight. She stood firm in the hallway, rain still fresh on her shoulders, as if she had learned to keep life's storms outside, and herself even further. "Do you want the pizza or not?" "I want to talk," he said quietly. Aylin exhaled, a heavy sound that seemed to carry years of weariness. "You had 2 decades to talk." He ran a hand through his hair. "And I've regretted every year I didn't." Something in his voice must have struck a chord, because her fingers loosened slightly around the delivery bag. "Please," he added. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Her eyes lingered on his, as if searching for the man she used to know beneath the layers of tailored suits and Fortune magazine features. Finally, she stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing them into a space neither of them had imagined revisiting. She placed the pizza on the counter without a word, eyes scanning the apartment. Luxury, marble, chandeliers, silence. "This isn't your world anymore," she said under her breath, not accusing, just stating a truth. Or maybe it never was. Karim leaned on the counter, watching her. "You look tired." "I work 2 jobs," she replied. "And I have a son." His eyes widened slightly. "How old?" 12. He did the math in his head. It didn't match. She read his expression instantly and scoffed. "He's not yours, Karim." "I wasn't thinking." "You were, but no, he's not." Silence again. He finally spoke, softer now. "I'm sorry." Aylin blinked. "For what?" "For not fighting for you. For not protecting what we had. For letting them, my family, decide how our story ended." Her jaw tightened. "I thought I was doing the right thing back then," he continued, "choosing the path they laid out for me. I thought love would come again, that I'd forget." "And did you?" "No," he said, his voice catching. "I never did." She looked away. "I thought you moved on," she said quietly. "Found someone. Got married." "I never did," he replied. "I couldn't." Aylin's breath trembled, barely audible. She turned away, pretending to inspect the pizza box. But Karim could see it. Her defenses were cracking. The wall she had built so carefully was starting to tremble under the weight of his sincerity. He walked closer, slowly. "What happened to you, Aylin? Why are you delivering pizzas?" She laughed bitterly. "Life happened. My father lost his job after your family's company shut down his firm. We couldn't afford my tuition anymore. I left university, started working. Then I got married, then I got divorced. Now I raise my son, take care of my mother, and do whatever it takes to survive." Karim's heart dropped. "Your mother?" "She has cancer, stage 3. "I'm sorry." "She doesn't need your pity," he nodded. "But she might need help." Aylin looked at him then, truly looked. "I don't want your charity, Karim. It's not charity. It's a debt. One I owe you, for everything I didn't do back then." Silence stretched between them again, heavy and raw. Then she whispered, "I don't know if I can let you back in." "I'm not asking for that," he replied. "Not yet. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." He moved toward the door, giving her space. "You can go," she said suddenly. He turned. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I think I need time." "Can I see you again?" A long pause. "Maybe." And with that she left, just like before. But this time, the door didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of something that had been waiting 20 years to begin. The streets of Istanbul bustled with their usual rhythm. Honking cars, street vendors shouting over the hum of the city, the scent of roasted chestnuts drifting through the air. But for Aylin, walking home from her second job with aching feet and a tired son by her side, the city felt heavier than usual. "Did you eat enough at school today, Emre?" she asked gently, adjusting the backpack strap on his shoulder. "I saved the chocolate milk for you," the boy said with a smile, handing her a crumpled carton from his bag. Her heart squeezed at the gesture. "No, baby, you need it more." "But you didn't have lunch." Aylin kissed his temple and ruffled his dark curls. He had his father's eyes, but all her softness. He was only 12, yet far too perceptive. He had grown up watching his mother stretch coins, cut coupons, and make one chicken feed 3 people for a week. Still, he never complained. He was her strength wrapped in a child's body. They reached their modest apartment in Fatih, a neighborhood full of narrow staircases, rusted balconies, and laundry hanging like prayer flags from every window. It wasn't much. The paint peeled, the elevator never worked, and the walls were thin. But it was home, a place stitched together by love, sacrifice, and the hum of survival. Fatma, Aylin's mother, was waiting at the door. Her face had grown paler over the months, her eyes slightly sunken, but she still greeted them with warmth. "Emre, did you bring your grandma her tea?" she asked. He ran into the kitchen, already setting up her favorite cup. Fatma turned to Aylin, her voice low. "You're late." "There was traffic." "There's always traffic, but your eyes, they look different tonight." Aylin didn't respond. She hadn't told her mother about Karim. Not yet. How could she? How do you explain that after 2 decades of abandonment, the man who once shattered you suddenly appeared at your door with eyes full of regret? That night, after Emre fell asleep, Aylin sat on the balcony with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the distant city lights. Her phone buzzed beside her. "Karim, are you okay?" She hesitated, then typed back. "Aylin, I am. Tired." He responded almost immediately. "Karim, can I ask something?" She didn't reply. "Karim, do you hate me?" She stared at the screen, fingers trembling slightly. "Aylin, I don't know what I feel. It's complicated." No response came after that, but the silence felt louder than any words. In another part of the city, Karim sat in his private gym, towel around his neck, staring at the floor. His assistant had briefed him on new investment opportunities in Germany. A merger was pending in Qatar. There were proposals, meetings, numbers, an entire empire demanding his attention. But all he could think about was the weight in Aylin's voice. He'd seen it in her eyes too, that exhaustion carved by years of responsibility, of carrying a child alone, of watching dreams crumble just to survive another day. He hadn't just lost her back then. He had abandoned her into a future she never asked for, and yet she still stood tall, still carried grace in her suffering. His phone rang. His mother. He let it go to voicemail. Layla Hanum had become increasingly aggressive in pushing the marriage proposal forward. Every week she sent profiles, resumes, background checks, as if choosing a bride were a business transaction. Karim hadn't told her about Aylin. He knew exactly how she would react. He could already hear her voice dripping with disdain. A delivery girl, a divorced woman with a child. They lived in 2 different worlds, but it was his world that felt hollow, not hers. He scrolled through the contacts on his phone, stopped at Aylin's name. His thumb hovered. Then a thought crossed his mind, unexpected and immediate. He opened a new note and typed a name. Emre. He didn't know why. Maybe because the boy had been on his mind since the moment he saw him. Something in the way Emre looked at his mother, the way he stood protectively beside her, reminded Karim of himself at that age, before the suits, before the skyscrapers, before the loneliness. He had built a life of glass and steel, but somehow she had built a family out of hardship. The next day, Aylin got up early to start her shift at the medical clinic where she worked part-time at the reception desk. Her feet ached from standing too long in the night before, and her eyes still held traces of a restless sleep. As she printed appointment slips and answered calls, a co-worker leaned over and whispered, "There's a man asking for you in the waiting area. Very tall, very expensive suit, looks like a CEO." Aylin's stomach dropped. Karim! She stepped out from behind the counter. He was sitting near the water cooler, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. It wasn't just his suit or the way he carried himself. It was the aura of someone who didn't belong in crowded waiting rooms, someone too powerful to be ignored. When he saw her, he stood immediately. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I wanted to see you. At my job. I didn't know how else. You could have called. You didn't answer last night." She hesitated. "That's because I didn't know how to." Karim looked down. "I just wanted to say, you don't have to carry everything alone. I've done it for 12 years. I know, and I respect that more than you'll ever know. But maybe it's time you let someone help." She crossed her arms. "And you think that someone should be you?" "I want it to be me," he said, "if you'll let me." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the chaos of the clinic buzzing around them. Phones rang, children cried, nurses passed back and forth. But for Aylin, it all faded. All she saw was the man who had once broken her heart, now standing before her, offering something she couldn't name, something she hadn't dared hope for, something she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. The scent of strong Turkish coffee lingered in the air as Aylin sat by the window of a small, unassuming cafe in Kadıköy. The place hadn't changed much since her university days. Same checkered tablecloths, same chipped mugs, same slow jazz humming through old speakers. It was a place untouched by time, like a corner of the past she could still visit without getting lost in it. Her fingers nervously played with the rim of her cup. She wasn't sure why she had agreed to meet him. Karim had asked gently, no pressure, no grand gestures, just a quiet text the night before. "There's a cafe that serves coffee just the way you used to like it. Would you meet me there?" And now here she was, with her heart pacing and memories creeping back into the cracks of her resolve. She heard the door open and instinctively looked up. He entered wearing no suit this time, just a dark coat over a simple shirt and jeans. For a moment, it disarmed her. He didn't look like a billionaire today. He looked like the boy she once loved. Karim approached slowly. "May I?" She nodded. They sat in silence for a beat, the weight of years suspended between them. "You remembered," she said, lifting the cup slightly. He smiled. "How could I forget? You used to drink 3 a day before exams, half sugar, no cream." Aylin allowed a faint smile. "And you used to sneak baklava in from your dorm kitchen." He chuckled. "They were terrible." "Disgusting," she agreed, laughing softly. It felt strange to laugh with him again. Stranger still to feel warmth in that laughter. Karim looked at her, serious now. "I meant it when I said I'm sorry." Aylin lowered her gaze. "I know. I don't know what to do with it." "Start by not carrying it alone," he said. "Let me help, not out of guilt, out of choice." She studied him. His eyes, though tired, carried a softness she didn't remember, a sincerity that made it hard to look away. "I don't want to be your redemption story, Karim." "You're not. You're the part of my life I got wrong, and I want to get it right, not to erase the past, but to honor it." She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "You left me. I know. My father lost his job because of your family. He worked for your uncle's firm. When the scandal happened, he was laid off overnight." Karim closed his eyes for a second. "I didn't know. You didn't ask." The words landed like stone. Aylin exhaled. "We lost everything. My mother sold her jewelry. I dropped out of school to work. I had dreams, Karim. I wanted to build things. I wanted to matter." "You still do," he said, his voice rough. "And you always mattered. To me." She didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket and slid a thin envelope across the table. "What's this?" "An offer," he said. "There's an opening at my company for a personal assistant. It's demanding but flexible. High pay, full benefits, and a scholarship program for continuing education. I can sponsor your return to architecture school." Aylin stared at the envelope like it was dangerous. "I don't want favors. It's not a favor. It's an opportunity, one you deserve." "And what do you expect in return?" "Nothing," he said, "except maybe a chance to be around you again. And Emre." At the sound of her son's name, her posture changed, more guarded, more alert. "You're not his father." "I know, but I'd still like to know him, if you'll let me." She folded her arms. "He already lost one man in his life. His biological father left before he was born. I don't want him getting attached to someone who might disappear again." "I won't." "How can I believe that?" Because I don't want to live a life without meaning anymore, Karim said. And the only time my life ever felt real was with you. His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, she believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of how quietly he said it. The cafe faded around them, voices, cups clinking, the shuffle of waiters. All of it became distant. All that remained was the fragile bridge being rebuilt between two people who had once known everything about each other and now knew nothing, but wanted to try again. Aylin touched the envelope. She didn't open it. Not yet. I'll think about it, she said softly. That's all I'm asking. They sat a while longer, sipping coffee, stealing glances, lost in thoughts neither dared speak aloud. It was strange how the heart could hold so much pain and still make room for hope. When they finally stood to leave, Karim reached for his wallet. Aylin placed a hand over his. I've got this one. He looked at her, surprised. I'm not the girl you left behind, she said. I pay my own coffee now. He smiled. I never doubted that. She walked ahead of him toward the door, but just before stepping out, she turned back. Karim? Yes. If I take the job... He waited. Don't treat me like someone who needs saving. His voice was steady. I wouldn't dare. And with that, she left him standing in the doorway of the cafe, heart full, mind reeling, and a quiet promise blooming in his chest. He wouldn't let her go again, not this time. The day had started like any other. Aylin was sorting files at her new desk inside the Al Rashid corporate tower, an elegant office high above the city skyline, where everything smelled of polished wood and power. It had only been 2 weeks since she accepted the job Karim had offered. The first days had been strange, walking through halls where people whispered and stared, not quite knowing what to make of her. Some assumed she was just another executive assistant. Others suspected more. But she held her head high. She kept her distance from Karim during office hours. They exchanged only necessary words, never lingering too long in the same room, as if proximity might reignite something they were both still trying to understand. Still, something subtle had shifted. Karim had begun to pass by her desk more often, sometimes with a question that didn't really need asking. Other times with nothing at all, just a glance, a pause, a silence that spoke of things unspoken. That morning, she had made him coffee without being asked, just the way he liked it. And when she placed it gently beside his laptop, he looked up and whispered, "Thank you," in a way that made her forget how to breathe. But it was a phone call that shattered the quiet rhythm of her new routine. It came just after noon. Aylin's cell vibrated on her desk, displaying the name of Emre's school. Her heart immediately skipped. "Mrs. Kaya," the voice on the other end asked, urgent but calm. "Your son has had an accident. He fell during gym class and hit his head. We've called an ambulance. He's being taken to MedStar Hospital." Everything inside her collapsed into panic. She barely remembered grabbing her bag, barely heard the concerned voices around her as she bolted from the office. Her breath came in shallow bursts as the elevator took too long to arrive. When the doors finally opened, Karim was there, exiting with his assistant. The moment he saw her face, his own expression changed. "Aylin, it's Emre," she gasped. "He's in the hospital. I have to go." "I'll drive," he said instantly. She hesitated, but her hands were shaking too much to argue. They sped through the city in his car, Karim weaving through traffic with calm precision. Aylin sat beside him, barely holding herself together. "He hit his head," she whispered. "He's just a child. What if... Karim reached out and took her hand, gripping it tightly. "He's strong. Like you." Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't pull away. When they arrived, Aylin ran through the hospital doors without waiting for him. She rushed to the reception desk, her voice nearly breaking. "My son, Emre Kaya. He was brought in. Head injury." The nurse nodded. "He's in observation. Room 312. He's stable." That word stable was a lifeline. She ran down the hall, heart pounding, until she found the door. Through the glass, she saw him lying on the hospital bed, pale but conscious, an ice pack on his forehead, and a nurse checking his vitals. "Mum!" he called the moment he saw her. She rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his small frame as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Karim stood at the doorway, watching silently. The nurse stepped aside to give them space. Aylin smoothed Emre's hair back and kissed his forehead, whispering prayers under her breath. "They said you fell during gym?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. He nodded. "We were playing dodgeball. I tripped and hit my head on the floor." "You scared me," she said softly, brushing tears from her face. "I'm okay now." Karim finally stepped inside, careful not to interrupt. Emre looked up at him, blinking. "You're the man from the office," the boy said. Karim smiled. "Karim Amka. That's what your mom used to call me, a long time ago." Aylin looked at him sharply, but Emre smiled. "You have a cool name." Karim walked over and placed a small bottle of orange juice on the bedside table. "Figured you might be thirsty." "Thanks." Aylin sat beside Emre as the doctor entered and explained that it was a minor concussion. No internal bleeding, no fractures, just rest, hydration, and observation for 24 hours. When the doctor left, silence filled the room again. Karim looked at Aylin. "Do you want me to stay?" She hesitated, but then nodded. "Please." That night, as Emre drifted into sleep, Karim sat in the corner chair, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He didn't say much. He didn't try to impress or intrude. He simply stayed. Aylin watched him from her seat beside the bed. There was something deeply unfamiliar about this version of Karim. Not the businessman, not the billionaire, but the man who held her son's hand while he dozed off, who bought snacks from the hospital vending machine, who whispered jokes that made Emre giggle, even with a bandage on his head. At one point, Emre, half asleep, reached toward Karim. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" he murmured. Karim nodded. "Always." Aylin felt her heart stutter, and when Emre finally fell into deep sleep, she whispered, "You didn't have to come." "I did," he replied. "Why?" Karim looked at her, his eyes gentle. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of you going through this alone." For the first time in years, she let her head rest on someone's shoulder. Not because she needed saving, but because for once, she didn't want to be strong. And Karim didn't speak. He just stayed beside her, like a promise neither of them had the courage to say aloud. The following morning dawned overcast, casting a soft grey light into the hospital room. Aylin woke to the quiet hum of monitors and the gentle rhythm of Emre's breathing. She was still in the chair beside his bed, her neck stiff and her limbs sore from the awkward position, yet she didn't regret a second of staying. Karim was gone, but there was a note on the windowsill, written in simple, deliberate handwriting. "Had to leave for a meeting, didn't want to wake you. Coffee is at the nurse's station. K." She picked up the note and smiled faintly, folding it carefully and placing it into her purse. Later that afternoon, after Emre was discharged, Karim's driver arrived, not with orders but with an invitation. No pressure, no rush, just a message. "When you're ready, he'd like to talk. About your future." Aylin didn't respond immediately. She spent the weekend focused on Emre, nursing him back to energy, spoiling him with cartoons and soup and checking his temperature every hour, even though the doctors said there was no need. But in the quiet moments, her thoughts kept drifting back to Karim, not just for what he had done, but for how he had done it. No grand declarations, no lavish gifts, just presence. And for someone who had spent years building walls around her vulnerability, that meant more than anything. On Monday morning, Aylin arrived at the corporate tower early. Her new badge still felt strange around her neck, the security gates a reminder of a world she never thought she'd be part of. But something was changing. Colleagues who once whispered now greeted her with cautious respect. The receptionist smiled a little warmer. Even the interns, who once avoided eye contact, now held the door open. Not because she was with Karim, but because she had earned her place. Karim called her into his office shortly before lunch. His assistant knocked first, then stepped aside as Aylin entered. He stood by the window as usual, hands behind his back. "You look rested," he said without turning. "Emre's doing better," she replied. "I'm glad." She stepped forward. "You wanted to talk," He turned then, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft. Yes, I've been thinking. You're overqualified for what we initially discussed. You have natural instincts, strong organizational skills, leadership potential. She raised an eyebrow. You've been spying on me. I've been watching you work, he said with a faint smile. There's a difference. Aylin folded her arms. Go on. He pulled a file from his desk and handed it to her. Inside were documents, an official promotion offer, salary, benefits, tuition sponsorship. It's a new position, executive assistant to the chairman. You'd work directly with me, but with flexibility, hours that allow you to care for Emre and return to school part-time if you choose. Aylin flipped through the pages slowly. Everything was formal, professional, fair. And yet, she looked up. Is this your way of keeping me close? Karim didn't flinch. Yes, but also my way of showing you that you're capable of so much more. I don't want you in the shadows. And if I say no, then I'll respect that. But I'll still find another way to support your studies. She placed the file on the desk and sat down, arms resting lightly on the table. You really believe I can become an architect again? I don't believe it, he said. I know it. Her chest tightened at his certainty. I used to draw buildings in the margins of my notebooks, she murmured. Tall towers with curved balconies, a city in the sky. My father said I'd change Istanbul's skyline one day. Karim leaned forward. Then, let's make sure you do. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. The silence charged not with tension, but possibility. Weeks passed, and Aylin stepped fully into her new role. She organized Karim's schedule with precision. She anticipated problems before they arose. She took conference calls, coordinated international meetings, and drafted reports that impressed even the most senior executives. She had a desk by the glass wall, overlooking the city. But more than that, she had purpose again. And every day after school, Emre came to the office. Sometimes he sat in the break room doing homework. Other times he played chess with Karim's driver or watched documentaries on Karim's office TV. But what warmed Aylin most was how naturally Emre gravitated toward Karim. They spoke about football, space, Turkish history, and Karim listened, not as a billionaire indulging a child, but as a man genuinely invested in a boy's world. One afternoon, Aylin found the two of them sitting on the floor of Karim's office, building a model airplane. Should I be concerned about workplace violations? She joked from the doorway. Karim looked up, grinning. We're in the innovation department. Emre held up the plane. Mum, Karim Amka says if I get good grades, he'll take us to see real planes in Dubai. Aylin smiled. Did he now? Karim shrugged playfully. Incentives work wonders. Later that evening, as she packed up her things, Karim walked her to the elevator. You've changed, he said softly. So have you. He looked at her then, not with longing, but admiration. Whatever you decide about us, I want you to know. I see you, not as the girl I left behind, but as the woman you are now. She met his gaze, her heart thudding. And who is that? He smiled. Someone powerful, someone becoming who she was always meant to be. And as the elevator doors closed between them, Aylin allowed herself a quiet breath of hope, because for the first time in years, she didn't feel small, she felt seen. Some transformations happen quietly, like the slow unfolding of petals under the morning sun. That was how it happened between Aylin and Karim, not in grand declarations, but in small, persistent moments that began to reshape everything between them. At work, they remained professional. Aylin handled Karim's schedule, coordinated meetings, filtered through mountains of documents, and offered insight that earned her admiration from the executive board. Her reputation had grown. No longer the mystery woman who had appeared from nowhere, she was now spoken of as sharp, efficient, poised. And Karim, he never let his personal feelings blur his expectations of her performance, at least not openly. But when the office lights dimmed and the suits went home, another version of them began to emerge. A softer one. It started with dinners. Karim invited her and Emre to his apartment once a week. At first, Aylin refused politely, then reluctantly agreed. on the condition that it wouldn't be extravagant, and he respected that. The first dinner was pasta, homemade. Emre helped stir the sauce while Karim chopped herbs with an unexpected grace. "You cook?" Aylin asked, arching a brow. Karim grinned. "Only when the guests are special." The evenings became ritual. They played board games after dessert, watched old Turkish movies and laughed at the exaggerated drama. Emre would fall asleep on the couch, and Karim would gently carry him to the guest room he had started calling Emre's room. One night, after Emre had gone to bed, Aylin lingered on the balcony with a glass of pomegranate juice in hand. The Bosphorus shimmered below, and Istanbul stretched endlessly into the horizon. Karim stepped beside her, their arms nearly touching. "It's strange," she murmured, "being here again, after so many years." He looked at her profile, the way the wind played with a loose strand of hair. "Strange. Or right." She didn't answer. Not with words, but she didn't step away either. Their hands brushed. She didn't pull back. On a Sunday morning, they took Emre to the Istanbul aquarium. Karim insisted on carrying the backpack. He bought snacks, pointed out sea creatures with genuine curiosity, and held Emre's hand every time the boy looked overwhelmed. In one of the quieter exhibits, Emre tugged on Karim's coat and whispered, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why don't you have kids?" Karim blinked. "I guess I was waiting for the right reason." Emre considered that. "Would you ever want one?" Karim's voice was low. "I think I already do." The boy looked confused, then smiled. That night, as they dropped Emre off at home, the boy turned and hugged Karim tightly. "See you later, Karim Amka." Karim closed his eyes at the sound of it. Uncle Karim. But in his heart, it didn't feel like uncle anymore. Fatma's condition was worsening. The chemo had taken its toll, and some days she barely left her bed. But her spirit remained sharp. She insisted on speaking with Karim one afternoon when he brought over groceries. He sat beside her while she sipped tea slowly. "I see how he looks at her," she said softly. Karim didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I let her go once," he said. "I won't do it again." Fatma studied him for a long moment. "She's strong, but that strength came from pain. If you break her again—" "I won't," he said simply. She nodded. "Then prove it." Not with promises, with presence. He did. He came to the apartment on weekends, even if just for a cup of tea. He helped fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. He picked up Emre from school when Aylin had class. He stayed up helping Emre with math homework neither of them understood, laughing until they gave up and made waffles instead. It wasn't just love that grew between them, it was trust. A trust forged slowly, carefully, and with a quiet reverence for everything that had once gone wrong. One evening, after Aylin had finished a long stretch of work and school, she arrived at her apartment to find the lights dimmed, candles flickering, and Emre bouncing excitedly. "Karim made dinner." She blinked in surprise. "Where is he?" "In the kitchen." She stepped inside to find him wearing an apron that said "World's Best Cook," clearly Emre's idea. "I hope you're okay with lentil soup and burek," Karim said, wiping his hands. She stared at him, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do this." He walked over, expression quiet. "I wanted to." And for the first time she allowed herself to lean into the warmth, to stop resisting the softness growing inside her. After dinner, when Emre went to bed early with a book in his hands and a smile on his face, Aylin joined Karim on the balcony once again. The silence between them felt sacred. He looked at her. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" She nodded slowly. "Sometimes." "And now?" She turned to face him fully. "Now I think maybe the story was never meant to be over, just paused." He stepped closer, barely an inch between them. "I'm still learning who you are now," he whispered. "But everything I discover makes me want to know more." Her voice was steady. "Then keep learning." And in the hush of the night, beneath the soft rustle of the trees and the hum of a city that never truly sleeps, Karim reached for her hand. She didn't let go. The golden courtyard of the Al Rashid estate in Dubai shimmered beneath the midday sun, its marble floors echoing the weight of footsteps, secrets, and tradition. Palm trees stood like sentinels around the house, their shadows dancing over manicured gardens that stretched endlessly across the property. Here appearances were everything, and emotions hidden beneath layers of silk, steel, and silence. Karim hadn't visited in months, but when his mother called and insisted he attend the family luncheon, he didn't refuse. Not because he feared her, but because he knew it was time. He had avoided this confrontation long enough. Layla Hanum greeted him at the entrance with the cold grace she had perfected over a lifetime. "You look tired," she said. "I've been working," he replied, brushing a kiss over her cheek. "You used to look powerful when you were working. Now you look distracted." They walked through the villa toward the dining hall where his uncle, aunt, and several cousins waited, dressed in linen and judgment. He saw it in their eyes, the unspoken question. What's happening to Karim al-Rashid? Over lunch, conversations drifted from oil investments to marriage alliances. It didn't take long before Layla steered the topic exactly where she intended. "The Emir's daughter is still waiting," she said, casually slicing her lamb. "Her father is beginning to feel insulted." Karim set down his fork. "Then you should stop implying I ever agreed." "You didn't disagree," she countered. "I didn't agree either." A silence fell. His uncle raised an eyebrow. "So you're still entangled with that delivery woman?" Karim's eyes narrowed. "Her name is Aylin Kaya. And yes, I am." Layla's voice was sharp now. "Karim, she's a divorced woman, a mother, a Turk with no family name, no dowry, no position. She has dignity, intelligence, strength. She delivers pizzas, Karim. She also manages my calendar better than anyone I've ever hired, and is studying architecture again, because she gave up her dreams when I failed her." His mother's lips thinned. Karim stood slowly. "I'm not here to ask for approval. I'm here to tell you I choose her and Emre." Layla's eyes flashed. "That child is not yours." "But he calls me Karim Amka. He trusts me. He looks at me like a father. You would throw away your inheritance, your name, for a woman who sells herself cheap to survive?" Karim's voice rose, firmer now. "She didn't sell herself. She survived when others would have broken, and I will not let her be disrespected." "You were raised to lead, not kneel," she hissed. "I'm not kneeling," he said, stepping forward. "I'm rising for the first time." Back in Istanbul, Aylin sat by her mother's bedside, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Fatma's breathing was shallow, her frame thinner than ever. But her hand still held Aylin's with fierce strength. "You're in love with him again," she said quietly. Aylin didn't answer at first. Fatma smiled weakly. "It's not a sin, you know. To love someone who finally learned how to love you right." Tears welled in Aylin's eyes. "I'm scared, Anne." "Of what?" "Of losing myself again. Of letting someone close and watching him walk away again." Fatma squeezed her hand. "You're not that girl anymore. You found your strength in the wreckage. Now let someone help carry the weight." Aylin buried her face in her mother's shoulder, the sob escaping before she could stop it. "I don't want to do this without you." Fatma stroked her daughter's hair. "Then don't. I'll be with you always, in every line you draw, in every wall you build, in the way you protect your son, and maybe in the man who finally came back." Later that week, Karim returned to Istanbul with a new calm in his eyes and an unshakable resolve in his voice. He arrived at Aylin's apartment unannounced. She opened the door and immediately saw the tension in his posture. "Your family?" she asked. "They know." "And?" "They said I'd lose everything if I stayed with you." Aylin's face went pale. "Your company, my name, my share, my stake in the legacy." She stepped back. "You can't give that up for me." "I'm not," he said gently. "I'm giving it up for me, for the man I want to be." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm not worth that." "You're worth more." A sudden knock interrupted them. A nurse. Fatma's condition had worsened. Within hours, they were at the hospital. Machines beeped steadily around Fatma's fragile form as Aylin held her mother's hand. Karim stood silently at her side. Fatma opened her eyes slowly. "Karim, I'm here." She gave a tired smile. "Take care of my girls." "I will." She turned to Aylin. "Promise me you'll live, Kazim. Not survive, live." "I promise," Aylin whispered, and with that, Fatma closed her eyes for the last time. The funeral was quiet, modest. Karim covered all expenses, refusing to let Aylin carry that burden alone. Emre clung to his mother's waist, silent but strong. Karim stood beside them like stone, present, unwavering, a pillar when they needed one most. In the days that followed, they mourned together. Not as lovers, not as colleagues, but as a family. A real one. And for the first time, when Emre crawled into Karim's arms one evening and said, "Can I call you Dad?" Karim didn't answer with words. He just held the boy tighter, burying his face in his hair. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not money, not legacy, not approval, only love. The weeks following Fatma's passing were soaked in a kind of silence that didn't scream, it whispered. A stillness that settled in corners of the apartment, in the way Emre stopped asking where she was, in the way Aylin would sometimes stare at her cup of tea, waiting for her mother's voice to echo from the kitchen. But life, as it often does, found a way to move, not through denial but through devotion. Karim was there every day, not intruding, not overwhelming, just present, fixing Emre's broken toy plane, driving Aylin to her evening classes, cooking when she was too tired, sometimes just sitting beside her in the living room, saying nothing. One night, after Emre had fallen asleep while coloring on the carpet, Aylin and Karim stood by the window, looking out at the blinking city lights. "You never asked me why I named my daughter Fatma," Karim said. Aylin turned to him, surprised. "Your daughter?" He nodded, smiling softly. "She never made it. Miscarriage. Years ago. We didn't tell the press. No one outside my family knew." Her breath caught. "I'm sorry. So am I, but I always thought if I ever had a daughter again, I'd name her after someone strong, someone kind." Aylin's throat tightened. There were no grand declarations that night, no kisses, just the quiet merging of two broken worlds beginning to heal in each other's presence. Across the sea in Dubai, Layla Hanum sat alone in her sun-drenched courtyard. The letter from Karim rested on her lap. No pleading, no apology. Just a quiet line. "If you want to know who I've become, come and see." She did not respond immediately, but something about her son's silence felt louder than all his past words. A week later, she arrived in Istanbul unannounced. Aylin was returning from work, holding Emre's hand when she saw the driver parked in front of her building. The back door opened. Layla stepped out. She wore a tailored beige coat, her expression calm but unreadable. "Mrs. Hanum?" Aylin asked, cautious. "I believe we've waited long enough for introductions." They sat in the small living room, Layla looking strangely at home despite the modest surroundings. Emre, ever the intuitive child, stayed close to his mother. Layla studied him. "You're the one who calls my son Karim Amka, yes?" Emre nodded silently. "You look like your mother." Aylin braced herself, but Layla's voice softened. "And that's a compliment." She turned to Aylin. "I fought against this. Harder than you'll ever know. But when I buried my pride, I saw something I hadn't in years. My son smiling. Not for the cameras, not for the empire, but truly, fully smiling." Aylin said nothing. "I won't pretend we're the same," Layla continued, "but I would rather welcome a woman of strength into our family than lose my son to loneliness." A beat passed. "Under one condition." Aylin's shoulders tensed. Layla smiled faintly. "The wedding will be in Dubai, and you will allow me the chance to introduce you both, formally, to our world." Karim stepped in from the hallway, where he had been listening, heart pounding. "She's not an object to present," he said. Layla turned. "She's family now. That's what I'm offering." Aylin met her eyes. "Then we'll do it for Emre, for peace." Layla nodded. "Then I'll call the wedding planner." Karim waited until they were alone on the balcony that night. Aylin stood in the moonlight, her hair loose, face serene, eyes distant. "She surprised me," she whispered. "Me too." A long pause. Then Karim stepped closer. "I was going to wait. Plan something extravagant." Buy a ring with a ridiculous diamond and stage it under chandeliers. She raised an eyebrow, amused. But none of that felt like us, he said. Not anymore. He reached into his pocket, not for a ring, but for a small paper crane. Folded clumsily by Emre with a note scribbled on its wing in shaky letters. Will you be my mum's forever? Aylin took it, tears rising instantly. Karim dropped to one knee, not because tradition demanded it, but because his heart did. I'm not promising you a life without pain, but I'm promising to stand beside you through all of it, to love Emre as my son, to build something better. With you. Aylin was crying now, her hand covering her mouth. Yes, she whispered. Yes. From the hallway, Emre's voice rang out sleepily. Does this mean you're my real dad now? Karim looked up, tears in his eyes. I always was. Aylin laughed through her tears and pulled both of them into her arms. And in that moment, the ghosts of the past stepped aside, making room for the life that was finally beginning. The air in Dubai shimmered with gold that morning, not just from the sun rising over the desert skyline, but from the sense of something rare unfolding, a wedding not built on alliance, duty, or legacy, but on love that had weathered time, heartbreak, and defiance. The ceremony was held in the gardens of a 5-star resort that seemed to rise from the sand like a mirage. Palm trees swayed under silk canopies, and white jasmine flowers floated in crystal fountains. Everything was elegance, without opulence, tradition, without pretense. Aylin stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, dressed in an ivory gown that shimmered with the faintest thread of silver. It wasn't designer. It was custom-made by a Turkish seamstress she had known since childhood. Every stitch carried memory. Every fold held meaning. Her hair was pulled back in soft waves, a single pearl tucked behind her ear. She stared at her reflection, not with vanity, but awe. Not because she looked beautiful, but because she had survived enough to see this day. Behind her, Emre adjusted his miniature tuxedo, struggling with the bow tie. Mum, can I say something during the ceremony? She turned to him, amused. Something like what? Like something I wrote. She knelt and straightened his collar. As long as it's not about football, yes. He grinned. There was a knock at the door. Karim. He didn't step inside, only peeked through as tradition allowed. His voice was gentle. 10 minutes. She nodded. I'll be ready. But what she didn't expect was who came with him. Layla. The older woman stepped into the room wearing a graceful beige ensemble and a necklace that once belonged to her own mother. She studied Aylin in silence, then approached slowly. I brought you something, she said, extending a small velvet box. Inside, a delicate gold bracelet etched with Arabic script. Aylin blinked. This must be... It was my wedding gift, Layla said. Now it's yours. Aylin hesitated. Are you sure? Layla's voice lowered. You're family now. And more than that, you've made my son whole again. For the first time they embraced, not as symbols of opposing worlds, but as two women who had loved, lost, and learned what truly mattered. The ceremony began as the sun reached its zenith. A small crowd of close friends, select business partners, and extended family sat beneath golden arches decorated with eucalyptus and lavender. Turkish and Arabic music blended softly, weaving the two cultures into one melody. Karim waited beneath the arch, his suit sharp, his eyes softer than ever. He didn't fidget. He didn't blink. He just waited. And when Aylin stepped into view, the garden held its breath. There was no orchestral crescendo, no flashing cameras, only Emre walking beside her, proudly holding her hand. When they reached the altar, Karim knelt and greeted Emre first, placing a gentle kiss on the boy's forehead. Then he looked up at Aylin. You're late, he whispered. She smiled. I wanted to make sure you were ready. The officiant spoke in both languages, honoring both legacies. Then came the vows. Karim's voice trembled slightly. I once thought love was a distraction, a weakness, but then I met someone who redefined strength, who taught me that true power is not in control, but in choosing vulnerability, in choosing love, even when it terrifies you. Aylin inhaled slowly. I once thought love had an expiration date, that if you lose it once, it never comes back. But then I saw you again, and the clock started over. There were no rings. Instead, they exchanged bracelets, symbolic, eternal. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Emre stepped forward nervously. "Can I say my thing now?" Everyone laughed gently. Karim and Aylin both knelt to his level. The boy pulled out a folded piece of paper and cleared his throat. "I used to think families were just people who lived in the same house, but now I know they're people who show up, people who stay when things are hard. Karim Amka, thank you for staying, for my mom, for me. You're not my real dad, but you became the kind I always wished for." Karim's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to call you uncle anymore," Emre whispered. "Can I call you Dad?" Karim nodded, unable to speak, and the garden, in its golden stillness, erupted in applause. The reception was simple and joyful. Children played by the fountain. Elderly aunts cried quietly over sweets. Business associates who once doubted the match now offered toasts in admiration. Karim danced with Aylin beneath a string of lanterns, their movements slow, easy, full of quiet wonder. At one point, Layla approached Aylin and said, "When you return to Istanbul, I want to help with your studies. There are architects in our family. You'll be the first woman." Aylin blinked in shock. "You don't have to. I want to." Karim caught the exchange from afar, his heart full, and when Emre ran up asking for another dance, Aylin scooped him into her arms and spun him beneath the lights. Karim joined them. They danced, not like a couple finding each other, but like a family that had finally come home. 1 year later, the wind that swept across the Bosphorus that morning was crisp and full of promise. The scent of sea salt and blooming fig trees drifted through the open balcony of the Carter apartments, a quiet residential complex nestled in a quieter street of Istanbul's Bebek district. Inside, sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, dancing over wood floors and half-open sketchbooks. There were pencils scattered across the table, architectural blueprints pinned beside drawings done in crayon. One corner of the living room belonged to Emre, another corner clearly to Aylin, and the rest, it had become theirs. A shared space, a shared life. Karim stood in the kitchen, barefoot, whisking eggs with one hand while holding a babbling toddler in the other. She had soft curls, the color of honey, and big, curious eyes that mirrored both her parents. "Fatma," he murmured softly to the child, "your brother's going to wake up late again unless we do something about it." The baby giggled. Aylin entered moments later, dressed in a linen blouse, her hair pinned up in a relaxed knot, a pencil still behind her ear. She kissed her daughter's forehead, then Karim's cheek, stealing a piece of bread from the counter. "Your eggs are burning," she teased. "No, they're not," he said, checking them quickly. "Okay, maybe just a little." Emre finally emerged from his room, taller now, more confident. He walked into the kitchen like he belonged there, because he did. "Mama, can I ride my bike after school? You have your literature test today, remember?" He groaned. Karim handed him a piece of toast. "If you pass, we'll go for ice cream. And if I fail, then we go anyway. But I'll ask embarrassing questions in front of your friends. Deal?" They all laughed. It wasn't a palace. There were no chandeliers, no maids or chefs or imported marble countertops, but it was home. And every morning began like this, simple, chaotic, alive. Aylin returned to university part-time. Her professors spoke highly of her. She submitted design proposals that made waves among the local architecture scene, some even landing her a small exhibition. At night, Karim helped her review papers, often falling asleep with red ink on his fingers. She would smile, watching him snore gently beside a half-read page. The man once known for being untouchable, now most at peace with a baby blanket across his chest and crayon drawings on his office desk. He stepped back from several board positions, not to retreat but to refocus. He still managed the company, but now with boundaries. Weekends were sacred, dinners were never missed, school plays were attended, even when he had to leave international meetings early. Some investors questioned his shift in priorities. Others quietly followed suit. It wasn't just Karim who changed. The world around him had to adjust too. On the anniversary of their wedding, they returned to Dubai. Not for business, but for rest. Layla met them at the airport, dressed in flowing linen, holding a hand-knitted scarf for Fatma and a new book for Emre. She still carried her sharp tongue and sharper eyes, but now she used them to defend her daughter-in-law when other women whispered. "She has more class in her silence than you have in your diamonds," she once told a gossiping guest at a gala. It wasn't affection in the way some families expressed it, but it was respect, and Aylin accepted it for what it was. One evening, while tucking Emre into bed, Karim sat beside him longer than usual. "Do you remember what life was like before all this?" Karim asked. Emre shrugged. "Not much. I remember Mum being tired a lot, and I remember drawing on the walls when she was asleep." Karim chuckled. "And now, I think this is what life is supposed to be." Karim didn't respond, just smiled and ran a hand through the boy's hair. He didn't need to say more because Emre was right. Later that night, Aylin stood on the balcony, holding Fatma against her chest. The city lights twinkled below like stars that had fallen to earth. Karim joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this?" she whispered. "Every day. And if I hadn't delivered that pizza, I would have ordered another one." She laughed softly. "But it had to be you," he added. "It always had to be you." They stayed like that for a long time. No words, just breath, warmth, and the sound of life moving quietly in the background. Aylin looked at the skyline, her voice steady. "You know, I think I finally understand what love really is." "What's that?" "It's not just the beginning. It's everything that comes after. The grocery runs, the 2 a.m. fevers, the apologies, the second chances." He kissed her shoulder. "And the pizza deliveries," he added. She smiled. "Especially those." And as the wind picked up, carrying laughter from the apartment behind them, they held each other with the kind of peace that only comes after surviving the storm. They didn't need perfection. They had something better. They had each other. They didn't end up where they thought life would take them. But maybe that was the point. He lost empires to win back the only thing that ever felt real. She gave up dreams, only to rediscover them through the eyes of someone who finally chose her, completely. And a boy, once raised in silence, now calls a man dad because love isn't always about blood. It's about showing up. Now tell me, what would you do if the past knocked on your door when you least expected it? Would you answer? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your like helps this channel grow and keeps stories like this coming to life. Share it with someone special.